The movie begins with a lone humanoid alien who is seen undergoing a ritual at the top of a waterfall. The humanoid alien takes out a cup of dark liquid and drinks from it, causing his body to decompose into particles of DNA after falling to the water. Tens of thousands of years later, in 2089, two archaeologists from Earth named Dr. Elizabeth Shaw and Dr. Charlie Holloway step into a cave in Scotland. The couple discovers an ancient marking which they call a star map, bringing them in awe and fascination. The two think of this as an encouragement and an invitation from humanity's pioneers and creators, known as the engineers, to come and find them. Inside a highly advanced space vessel called the Prometheus, a crew ventures to locate the engineers through the star maps discovered by Shaw and Holloway. This expedition is funded by Peter Weyland of the Weyland Industries. His daughter, Meredith Vickers, leads their voyage while the reliable android named David has monitored the ship's crew throughout their journey on their way to their destination, LV-223. The entire crew of Prometheus has traveled to space through a stasis, a process in which their whole body's normal flow is stopped with cryogenics. After a 2-year sleep, Vickers, Shaw, Holloway, and the rest of the crew all wake up when they arrive at their destination in December 2093. The crew consists of experts from various fields of science and technology. David assists them during their awakening, and the crew all meet and gather for the first time in 2 years. Vickers notices Janek, the captain and main pilot of the Prometheus, as he enthusiastically sets up a Christmas tree to commemorate the holidays. During their mission briefing, Weyland delivers a message to orient the crew. Besides, he introduces David, his recreation, as his son who will never grow old and die. Dr. Shaw and Dr. Holloway also explain their discoveries. They show images of their archaeological digs from all over the Earth, in which men look up to the sky, worshipping giant beings from above. Using their accumulated star maps, the couple introduces their search for the engineers' living place. This study has brought them to explore the LV-223. Some of their shipmates question their theory, given the accumulated knowledge throughout history regarding the beginning of humanity. Nonetheless, Shaw expresses her firm belief in their research. During the evening, David summons Shaw and Holloway through the orders of Vickers. They come to her office where she tells both of them about her doubts regarding the existence of the engineers. Despite that, she makes it clear to them that they cannot make any contact with the engineers without her approval. The captain of Prometheus, Janek, also allows the ship's landing as the crewmates brace themselves. Ford, the ship's medic, briefly studies the composition of LV-223. She learns that the oxygen levels are insufficient on that planet and realizes that they're dead within 2 minutes without a suit. Then, they reach a desolate and mountainous area. The survey team suits up in preparation for their exploration. Holloway asks David why he is wearing a suit when he is an android that does not breathe. David casually explains that it is because he wants to look more like a real person and make others to be at ease around him. The survey team makes their way into the mountainous surface where they discover structures that are in straight lines and perfect shapes. Holloway later finds that while the air outside the LV-223 is toxic, the air on the mountainous surface is breathable. They tell him not to remove his headgear, but he carries on and finds it able to breathe normally. The rest of the crew remove their headgear, suspecting that something is manufacturing breathable air in the area. In their exploration, they also utilize a mapping device to scope the entirety of the planet. The mapping device scans through the mountainous surface, and the place's overall structure is illustrated through a hologram in the ship's control room. As they explore deeper in the mountainous surface, they come across a decapitated corpse of what seems to be an alien. One of the crew members, named Fifield, slowly withdraws out of fright at all the discovery while David tries to read the texts on the walls. He walks away with their shipmate, Milburn, and they decide to go back to Prometheus. Holloway, Ford, and David continue inside a room and are welcomed by the sight of a huge statue of a humanoid head. The room also contains a number of cylinder-shaped stones, as well as a few corpses from unidentified creatures. David catches sight of a dark liquid coming out of the stone, and he is tempted to touch it. Just then, Shaw reminds everyone to be careful not to touch anything inside the room. Even so, David ends up curiously touching the dark liquid that leaks out of the cylinder-shaped stone. Suddenly, Shaw senses the air structure slowly changing inside the room, along with the murals on the mountain's ceiling. Therefore, she quickly collects the alien skull with Ford and puts it in a bag to bring along with them. Meanwhile, Janek and his team of pilots detect an incoming storm and urge the survey team to come back to the ship. David secretly recovers one of the cylinder-shaped stones and stores it in his bag before leaving with the crew. The crew rushes to get back to Prometheus as they race against the storm behind them. Shaw gets caught in a storm while trying to salvage the humanoid head that fell, but Holloway and David come to her rescue. While the survey team manages to return, Milburn and Fifield get lost inside the mountainous surface while on their way back to the ship. Janek detects a new life force inside the mountainous surface, informing Milburn and Fifield. The two check the location of the life force through Janek's instructions but find nothing. Unable to do anything at the moment, Janek instructs them to stay suited inside the mountainous surface while they wait for the storm to pass. Back in Prometheus, Shaw and Ford study the alien head and uncover that it is a helmet and not a skull. With the help of David, they lift the helmet up and find an actual head inside. Shaw becomes thrilled upon seeing the head, believing that it belongs to an engineer. Ford makes an incision to trigger its nervous system as the head slowly comes alive. It leaks out the black liquid, which is the same as before in the cylinder-looking stone, and produces an unusual odor, causing them to immediately contain the head. Shaw insists on continuing their study, so she orders Ford to collect more samples from the head. Later, David communicates briefly with Weyland using high-tech headgear. Vickers notices it and interrupts David, asking him about their conversation. David refuses to tell, and as a consequence, Vickers drags him in a corner and strangles him. David does not feel threatened, but ends up telling her Weyland's command to him is to work hard. In fact, Weyland orders him to test the effect of the dark liquid on Holloway. Later, David finds Holloway in a room. He asks Holloway how far he would go to gain his answers, and Holloway replies that he is willing to do anything and everything. Convinced of his answer, David then takes a portion of the dark liquid he retrieved and secretly puts it in Holloway's drink. Without even realizing it, Holloway unconsciously drinks it. Then, he comes to Shaw's cabin. Shaw shows him the matching DNA composition between the engineers and humans, confirming that they indeed came from the engineers. This means that the engineers are the creators of human beings. Holloway says that there is nothing special about the creation of life because anybody can do it. Shaw frowns at the thought, reminding him that she is infertile. He consoles her in an instant, and the two reconcile as they have an emotional moment. At the same time, Vickers arrives in the control room and finds Janek. Due to her indifferent and dismissive nature, Janek asks Vickers if she is a robot. In reply, Vickers tells him to come to her room, leaving the control room empty. Inside the mountainous structure, Milburn and Fifield discover the room containing the cylinder-shaped stones. The dark fluid has begun to leak rapidly out of each stone while the two explore them. Suddenly, a long snake-looking creature slowly approaches Milburn and Fifield. They contact the control room but get no response from anyone, including Janek. The creature tightens its grasp on Milburn and breaks his arm. Fifield tries to cut the creature off Milburn, but it splashes venomous fluid that quickly damages Fifield's helmet. The creature penetrates through Milburn's protective suit and kills him, while Fifield dies in the dark liquid. The storm passes the following day, therefore Prometheus comes back to the mountainous structure. Holloway wakes up feeling an odd sensation and finds his eyes slowly reddening. At the same time, Shaw wakes up to a call from Janek about losing track of Milburn and Fifield. The survey team drives with Janek back to the mountainous surface to fetch them. David, on the other hand, is instructed by Janek on a separate mission to track the life force he had detected in the control room earlier. From the Prometheus, Vickers tells David to uplink his feed to her room, permitting her to see the inside of the place remotely. David comes across the crew's mapping device and learns that it is stuck on a door. He lifts the door, allowing the mapping device to enter a room, which is revealed to be the innermost center of the mountainous surface. At this time, David disconnects his feed and cuts Vickers' remote access, angering her. David studies the room with interest, able to see a hologram of the engineers as he watches them in action. He learns through the hologram that the mountainous surface is actually the engineer's ship. Just when he finds out that the ship has set its destination on Earth, the hologram shuts off. His gaze heads towards a huge chamber which carries a living engineer under stasis. On the other side, Janek and the survey team continue their search for their two shipmates. They return to the room with the cylinder stones and notice the large amount of black liquid leaking from it. The crew is startled upon seeing Milburn's corpse, while Ford steps in to check his body. At this moment, Holloway suddenly falls. His eyes continue to worsen and an infection is suspected. Shadow calls the attention of Janek to get him treated. Just then, the snake-looking creature inside Milburn resurfaces and kills one of the crew members before escaping. Shaw halts their search for Fifield and Milburn, communicating with Vickers to send in a medical team for them. The black liquid uncontrollably seeps into Holloway's body, and he struggles in his suit. The survey team stops short just outside the ship's back door. Janek commands the door to be opened, but Vickers refuses to follow him. On the contrary, she wears her protective suit and brings out a flamethrower. She informs the survey team that Holloway is no longer allowed to board the Prometheus due to his threatening condition. Janek argues with her, saying that Holloway is a sick shipmate who needs to be treated immediately. However, Vickers is firm with her decision as she orders the rest of the crew except Holloway to go back on the ship. Shaw continuously pleads with Vickers to reconsider, but ends up in vain. Holloway distances himself from the crew, implying that he is fine with Vickers' decision. He consoles Shaw and bids goodbye to her before letting Vickers burn him to death. Shaw cries in agony at the sight and faints, then wakes up on a table where David conducts a quarantine failsafe to her. After a quick checkup, David reveals to her that she is 3 months pregnant. Hearing the result, Dr. Shaw startles in shock. She tells David that she is infertile and that it would be impossible. He admits to her that the fetus is of a different kind, making her plead to him in panic. He offers her to be put under stasis again until they return to Earth, but Shaw insists on taking the creature out of her body immediately. David tells her that there are no personnel in the ship capable of performing surgery on her. Right then, Shaw shouts because of the aching pain in her stomach. As a result, David tranquilizes her and puts her back on the table. Ford arrives after a while to put her back in stasis. With the tranquilizer wearing off, Shaw begins to make a resistance. She runs to the ship's medical pod and prepares to perform a surgery on herself. She quickly settles in the pod as the creature begins to move inside her belly. The medical pod proceeds with the automated surgery, initiating anesthetics. It cuts her belly open, revealing a squid-like creature lingering inside her. As the surgery continues, the creature is successfully extracted from her before it stitches her abdomen closed. Shaw gets out of the room in an instant and locks the creature inside of the medical pod. Meanwhile, Janek communicates with the other crew members after locating Fifield's monitor just outside the Prometheus. They open the ship's back door and find a mutated Fifield who has been consumed by the dark liquid. Fifield monstrously attacks the crew members on the back door and mercilessly kills them. Janek uses a flamethrower to kill him while the other crew members crush him with a military vehicle. During this time, Shaw stumbles upon an unfamiliar room where she sees Weyland and his team. She later learns that Weyland has undergone stasis and has boarded the Prometheus with them. In addition, she finds out about David's encounter with the last living engineer. Weyland finally discloses that he trusts in her research, which is why he approved of funding the whole expedition. He also believes that through the help of the engineers, he can find a way to live forever. It is Weyland's ultimate goal to gain eternal life. Weyland prepares to meet with the engineer, leaving Shaw dazed and confused. She goes back to her cabin to compose herself as Janek comes to visit her. Janek asks her about her plans, asserting that their supposed destination, the LV-223, was not the home of the engineers, but was rather a military facility. He tries to persuade her into going back to Earth despite the questions left unanswered. In response, she tells him that a living engineer has been discovered, indicating that they are close to getting their answers. Later, Vickers finally meets with her father, Wayland, while in the middle of wearing his protective suit. Vickers explains to him the danger of going to the mountainous surface. While Wayland argues with her, Vickers tries to make him realize that death is inevitable for everyone, including him. Wayland chooses to meet the engineer despite his daughter's warning. He departs the ship together with David, Ford, and Shaw. Inside the mountainous surface core, they uncover a large amount of the cylinder-shaped stones surrounding them. From the Prometheus, Janek studies the structure of the mountainous surface, where he concludes that it is, in fact, a gigantic ship. The mechanics of the entire ship have impressed David, and he leads them to their destination. David wakes the last living engineer from stasis, and they all stare while he gets up from his chamber. The crew falls into a frenzy while they bombard him with questions. David speaks by using the engineer's language and addresses the concerns of Wayland, asking if the engineer knows any way to live immortally. But all of a sudden, the engineer beheads David and his head is separated from his body. They all watch in surprise at the engineer's attack and rush to stop him. The engineer grabs Ford and tosses her away, and then she's dead. He kills Wayland and the rest of the crew except Dr. Shaw, who has barely succeeded in running away. Wayland lays lifeless beside the still functional David, and David bids farewell to Wayland, who he considers his father and creator. Vickers watches everything from their ship and ultimately decides to abort the mission. Janek follows her and prepares Prometheus on his flight back to Earth. Later, the engineer revives the huge spacecraft and resumes the original mission of going to Earth while David's still functional head watches him. The impact of the spacecraft's reactivation throws Shaw outside, where she flees toward the Prometheus. She relays the crew the engineer's plans for releasing the dangerous dark liquid on Earth. After all that Shaw has been through, she believes that the engineers hate human beings, and that they plan to travel to Earth to kill all human beings using the dark liquid. As a result, she pleads to Janek to stop the engineer from going to their planet. Janek becomes torn as Vickers orders him to dismiss Shaw and leave the place immediately. Eventually, Janek decides to listen to Shaw and willingly chooses to sacrifice his life for the sake of Earth. He ends the discussion with Vickers, setting up the escape pod for her and the rest of the crew. His co-pilots decide to join him while Vickers runs her way to the escape pod. Janek and the pilots generate a powerful force enough to turn Prometheus into a bullet. The ship ejects its lifeboats while Vickers boards the escape pod and successfully makes it out of the Prometheus. At this time, the Prometheus crashes onto the engineer's spacecraft, creating a huge explosion and causing it to crash on the ground. Shaw and Vickers witness the collision before they hurriedly run away from the massive impact, with big lumps of heavy metal falling all over the place. Shaw is able to roll away in time, but Vickers gets crushed by the spacecraft and she's killed. Shaw becomes the sole human survivor from the entire crew of Prometheus. However, she soon breathes with difficulties as a result of her damaged spacesuit. She rushes to a nearby lifeboat where she is able to stabilize her breathing. Inside, she finds the room containing her squid-looking offspring that has rapidly increased in size. David's operative head is able to reach Dr. Shaw, and he relays a warning about the engineer. He tells her that the engineer is coming for her and that she needs to get out of the lifeboat. Just then, the engineer arrives, aggressively opening the door to the lifeboat. The engineer attacks her, and in defense, she frees her squid-looking offspring. The squid-looking offspring strangles the engineer's throat and holds it in control as Shaw runs out of the lifeboat with a working spacesuit. She lies on the ground while staring in the sky, bursting with agony at the mission's downfall. After a while, David calls out to her, asking for her help in retrieving his remains. Shaw is unwilling, but comes for him after he offers a way out of the LV-223. She returns to the alien spacecraft for David, and while he discusses a possible pathway back to Earth, she interrupts him. Rather than going back, she aims to reach the home place of the engineers to finish their mission and ultimately seek for answers. The two team up, and together, they depart the LV-223 in a new ship controlled by David. The movie ends with Shaw making a final report of the ship, Prometheus, during New Year's Day. She reports that she is the last survivor of Prometheus and is still in search of the engineers. She also states that the ship and the entire crew are gone, warning the listeners not to make any attempts on coming to the LV-223. Back in the lifeboat, an alien creature mutates out of the engineer, signifying a possibility of another encounter between the aliens and the humans.